The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Speaking of Cults. I'm your host, Chris Shelton, and as always, we're here to explore the dynamics of coercive control, high-demand groups, and the human psyche's vulnerability to influence. Now, usually we delve into specific groups or historical examples, or we do interviews, but today feels different, doesn't it? From where I'm sitting, the air feels a little thick with anxiety. Everywhere you turn, the news is dominated by economic worries, inflation, job security, the impact of Liberation Day. Trump's tariffs are front and center. For some of us, it feels we're living in a kind of 1984-esque situation where up is down, freedom is slavery, and American citizens are being taken right off the streets with no indication of due process and sent to prisons in other countries. The stock market has plummeted in response to Trump's announcements, and we're being told by those in charge that things are going to be tough for a while. But there's a brand new day of prosperity for us all if we just hold out. Where have I heard that before? Many of you are feeling that this administration is not just worse than we thought, but that perhaps the entire American experiment is now coming to a frighteningly fast end. It would be easy to just launch into a rant about the state of affairs, but that's not what this podcast is about. My expertise lies in understanding how groups and individuals exert undue influence and control. And while the current global and national climate isn't a traditional cult, the underlying psychological dynamics at play are strikingly familiar. Today, I want to offer you a framework, a way to understand what's happening through the lens of coercive control, and more importantly, some tools to navigate these turbulent times with greater resilience and clarity. Let's start by acknowledging the elephant in the room, the sheer weight of uncertainty. When people feel economically insecure, when they see established norms and processes being challenged or disregarded, it creates a fertile ground for anxiety and fear. This is a natural human response. As the economist John Maynard Keynes observed, quote, "The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from old ones," end quote. This holds true for societies as well as individuals. When old certainties are shaken, we become more vulnerable to seeking out new, sometimes simplistic answers, and that's where the potential for manipulation increases. One of the first parallels I see between cult dynamics and the current environment is the control of information. We're bombarded with information, often conflicting, making it incredibly difficult to discern what's true and what's not. This mirrors how cult leaders often control the flow of information to their followers, creating an insular reality where only their narrative holds sway. Think about how information is being presented around tariffs and the economy. Are we seeing a nuanced discussion, including a range of expert opinions and data? Or are we being fed a simplified narrative that blames a specific group or policy while downplaying other contributing factors? If TikTok or YouTube Shorts and Instagram are the primary sources of your news, it would simply be impossible for you to be fully informed about anything. The very nature of those platforms creates addiction and shallow thinking. But to pile authoritarian tendencies on top of that is a recipe for disaster, and that's what we now see across the social media world. And this has created what we call a post-truth environment, where it's not just facts that are in dispute, but the very concept that truth even exists or that facts matter. We are seeing a massive devaluation in knowledge, intellect, or the pursuit of academic issues. And while this may seem like a new thing that no one has ever experienced before, that's not the case at all. Historian and philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote in The Origins of Totalitarianism, quote, "The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but the people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, that is, the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, that is, the standards of thought, no longer exist." End quote. This blurring of reality is a dangerous precursor to the acceptance of extreme ideologies. Hannah wrote about this right after World War II, while most of the people who are now creating this post-truth world were just children. This sort of thing, unfortunately, happens throughout history because it's one of the fastest and easiest ways to engage in population control. We see this information control in the way certain news outlets or political figures frame events. It's not just about having a different opinion, it's about the deliberate shaping of reality to fit a specific agenda. This can involve selective reporting, emphasizing certain facts while downplaying or ignoring others. Also, framing, presenting information in a way that elicits a specific emotional response. Then there's repetition, constantly repeating a message, even if it's false, until it's accepted as truth. And then finally, censorship or suppression, actively silencing dissenting voices or alternative perspectives. Another key element in coercive control is the creation of an us versus them mentality. Cults thrive on dividing their members from the outside world, portraying anyone who disagrees as an enemy or a threat. We see similar dynamics playing out in our broader society. Consider the rhetoric of the White House around immigration. This topic has been the source of a lot of anger across history, as people who are struggling locally do not welcome new arrivals with open arms since they consider them competition for resources. This is easy enough to understand, but when resources are plenty and available for everyone, this attitude doesn't make any sense. Yet the rhetoric around immigration now is so vitriolic and full of blatant, easily disproved lies that we have to ask what this administration is really after. Are we seeing leaders who seek to unite and find common ground, or those who exploit divisions for political gain? Social psychologist Henri Tachevel tells us that anything can be used to divide people, not just the classic tropes of skin color or language or geographic nationality. Yet, when this is amplified by political rhetoric, the consequences can be so severe that we are now seeing our Bill of Rights being used as toilet paper by this administration. This is what happens when prolonged use of propaganda has incensed our population to hate whoever the government tells them to. The us versus them narrative is a powerful tool. It simplifies complex issues, it creates a sense of urgency, and it makes it easier to justify extreme measures. When we see our fellow citizens as the enemy, it erodes our empathy and our ability to engage in constructive dialogue. Furthermore, we're seeing a deliberate erosion of trust in established institutions. Whether it's the media, the judiciary, or even scientific bodies, there is a concerted effort in some corners to sow doubt and undermine their credibility. This is a classic tactic in coercive control. By eroding trust in external sources of information and authority, individuals become more reliant on the dominant narrative that's being presented. Think about the way institutions such as the Environmental Protection Agency or the Veterans Administration have been attacked, defunded, and now are being ripped apart from the inside. That's only possible in an environment where a majority of our population believe with all their heart that there is nothing they can do about it. The people who carry out this destructive work count on your inaction. And because they've done such a good job of sowing distrust in these institutions, there's even a small minority of people loudly cheering on this destructive behavior. And that group of people are more and more vulnerable to manipulation with each passing day. This can and will create power vacuums that will be filled by charismatic figures or groups who offer simple solutions and certainty in a time of chaos. The path we are on does not ever correct itself or come to its own end. History shows us that the only way authoritarian administrations end is because people actively fight back. So, what can we do in the face of all this? How can we apply our understanding of coercive control to navigate these challenging times? Here are a few strategies. First, cultivate critical thinking. This is your most powerful defense against manipulation. My favorite critical thinker, Carl Sagan, said, "The ability to think critically and evaluate evidence is essential to the survival of a free society." We need to be active consumers of information, not passive recipients. Question everything. Don't just accept information at face value, especially if it evokes strong emotions. Ask yourself, who is providing this information? What are their potential biases or agendas? Are they funded by entities with vested interests? Are they presenting evidence or just opinions and assertions? What is the quality of that evidence? Is it from primary sources? Is it peer-reviewed? Are there other credible sources that corroborate this information? Do those sources have a track record of accuracy and fact-checking? Are they using emotionally charged language or logical fallacies to persuade you? Be aware of techniques like ad hominem attacks, straw man arguments, and appeals to your emotion. Be particularly wary of information shared solely within echo chambers. Social media algorithms often reinforce our existing beliefs, creating filter bubbles that shield us from dissenting viewpoints. You have to actively seek out diverse perspectives, even if they make you uncomfortable. Believe me when I tell you that the people who are in charge do not want you thinking, and they definitely don't want you questioning. Second, focus on what you can control. The scale of the problems we face can feel overwhelming, leading to feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. But remember, you have control over your own thoughts, actions, and immediate environment. So prioritize your mental and physical well-being, engage in self-care practices that help you manage stress. It could be exercise, mindfulness, spending time in nature, or connecting with loved ones. In times of uncertainty, these practices are not luxuries. These are necessities. Third, strengthen your community connections. Cults isolate their members, making them more dependent on the group. Don't let fear or division isolate you. Reach out to your friends, your family, your neighbors. Engage in dialogue. Respectful, but even if you disagree, still talk. Strong social connections provide a vital support system and help to counter those feelings of isolation and despair. Get involved in your community. It's volunteering, local activism, even supporting local businesses. Community resilience is a powerful antidote to societal fragmentation. 4, be vigilant about the erosion of norms and due process. The reports of civil and human rights violations being committed by this administration already are deeply concerning. Our rights and laws are the cornerstones of a free and just society, but only when we honor and respect them. When these norms are violated, it creates a slippery slope towards authoritarianism. We must hold our leaders and institutions accountable for upholding these principles at the local level. You cannot do much to directly fight the whole of Congress or the whole of a state judiciary, but that doesn't mean you're powerless as an individual, and that doesn't mean we are powerless collectively. Make a conscious effort every day to do something, such as staying informed about local challenges and policy changes, supporting organizations that defend civil liberties, contacting your elected officials to express your concerns, and participating in peaceful protests or demonstrations. And finally, recognize the signs of undue influence, not just in extreme groups, but in mainstream rhetoric. Be aware of these red flags: love bombing, overwhelming displays of approval or affection designed to lower your defenses; isolation, attempts to cut you off from outside influences or critical voices; demand for purity, the idea that you must adhere to a strict ideology or set of beliefs without any deviation; threats and fear-mongering, when they use fear to control behavior or suppress dissent; and the illusion of choice, making it seem like you have options when in reality the choices are tightly controlled. All right, today's show asks, is America becoming a cult? I didn't ask that as clickbait, and this isn't about equating the current political climate directly to a cult. That would be a simplistic and inaccurate comparison. But understanding the psychological mechanisms of coercive control provides us with a valuable framework for analyzing what's happening around us. It also recognizes that we're all feeling a little weird lately. A little like we're in some kind of twisted Twilight Zone episode, or somehow we're all being pranked by Satan or something. And that feeling, that weirdness, is not something to ignore. I can tell you from personal experience that I'm very well acquainted with that feeling because it's how I felt most of the time that I was in Scientology. It's not mentioned that often, but being in a cult is a very weird experience. And one of the reasons for that is because you are living in a controlled, very crafted environment. And everyone around you is carefully trying very hard to act as though all the weirdness is perfectly normal. But no matter how hard you believe, you always know you're kind of faking it. And I believe a lot of people are feeling that way right now. By recognizing the tactics of information control, the creation of us versus them mentalities, the erosion of trust, and the manipulation of fear, we can become more discerning and resilient. The anxiety and uncertainty many of us are feeling are valid. These are complex and challenging times. But remember, we may not be able to choose what happens to us, but we do have the power to choose our response. We have the capacity for critical thought, for empathy, and for collective action. By cultivating these qualities, by supporting one another, and by remaining vigilant in the defense of our values, we can navigate these turbulent times with a clear head and maybe even integrity. This week, I encourage you to take some time to reflect on some of this. Engage in conversations with those around you. Seek out information from diverse sources. Critical thinking and situational awareness never come naturally, so work on them. They're disciplines you can and you should practice all the time. Thank you for joining me on this Speaking of Cults podcast this week. If you found this episode helpful, please consider sharing it with others and supporting this channel on Patreon. Until next time, stay informed, stay connected, and stay critical. Bye-bye.